I'm Kimberly Foster, the founder and editor-in-chief of For Harriet. I am here with one of our contributors, Jamie Swift. So we decided to start a new series of discussions at For Harriet to take some of the most popular pieces, the most talked about pieces on the site, and actually kind of chat with the people who wrote them to really explore the ideas further. It's just another way that we are going to be deepening the conversations that we have online. So first of all, thank you so much, Jamie.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'm really, really excited to have this conversation. You wrote a piece that we published last week that was incredibly popular, and I have to say that I didn't see it coming. So I always say when we have these sorts of discussions about what is popping on the site that sometimes I can really guess, right? There are certain topics that I just know are going to attract lots of eyeballs. I don't know if I would have put money on this one. But when I saw the conversations that were happening around it and the sorts of back and forth, it kind of makes perfect sense because this is a really old debate. So the piece that you wrote was titled Why I Don't Fuck with Feminism, Even If It's Intersectional. And of course, I said fuck, but we didn't post that on the site. Anyways, I wanted to get some feedback from you and to hear a little bit more about why you wrote the piece and where we can go from here. So I guess my first question is, why does it even matter what you choose to call yourself if you are invested in the work of liberation for all people?
I think it definitely matters how you define. Self-definition really matters in this context because for so long, historically and contemporarily, we have relied on white rhetoric and white language to define our movements, our places within movements, ourselves. And I feel like it's a time now, even more so with Black Lives Matter, with the Say Her Name campaign, all these things happening, that we start defining ourselves and taking control of our content and context, which is for us and by us. Like, I really think FUBU should come back and we can have a movement. We can start having language for us and by us and not rely always on, language that was not created for us,
Absolutely. And I think, I completely agree with the need for spaces that we control. Of course, that's kind of the mission of For Harriet, right? One of the reasons why we've created it and run it. Was there a particular incident that inspired you to write the piece, or were you just kind of generally fed up?
It was a combination. So in my work, in my grad school, I'm going to go to Howard to get my PhD, and a lot of my work centers on Afro-Brazilian women's movement. And I was reading about what was going on in their movement with feminism, and it's the same thing in the diaspora, whether it's in Brazil or in the United States. White feminists have consistently divided or separated Black women from the movement. And I was just getting tired of this chronic segregation of Black women trying to so-called find their space in this movement, and they're constantly being rejected. They were rejected in the Black Power movement because of the sexism, and then they were rejected because of the racism within the feminist movement. And I was like, you know what? Why do I have to be a part of a movement or align with a movement that doesn't care about the sanctity of Black womanhood? And that's why I was just like, I have to write about this.
Right. Do you self-identify as a womanist?
I do self-identify as a womanist, and people, in the article, like I said, people have gotten upset with me, both Black and white women. Well, why don't you align with feminism? And I asked them, why do you rely so heavily on that word? And in my piece, I say, I'm a womanist, but I don't have to be a feminist to want women's empowerment or women and girls empowerment or equality. But it's like, because you don't align with the word feminist, people have an issue and they don't want to hear anything else. And when you give them the historical implications and the modern implications of feminism, white feminism, they don't want to hear that, but they want to hear why you're not a feminist. So I do align with womanism.
Yeah, I think one of the roadblocks for a lot of people is the feeling that what you've outlined in your piece is basically the same thing as Black feminism, right? So how in your mind would womanism, the way that you conceive or practice womanism, how would that differ from the Black feminism that I claim, honestly?
Well, so I was reading during my studies for my, thesis and dissertation. I started reading Clenora Hudson Weems. She's the author of Africana Womanism, Reclaiming Ourselves. And I started looking at, she mentions in her article, in her books rather, that even though Black feminism has distinguished itself from feminism to talk about Black women's issues and rights and things of that nature, it still has feminism within its title, which still is connected to white feminism or the pioneering feminism that we know today. And I just really want to distinguish myself. And I feel like many womanists Black womanists who've come to this conclusion, really distinguishing ourselves from feminism altogether, because it still has that implication. When you think of feminism, it stems from white male patriarchy and it goes down to white female, the patriarchy. And then it concludes intersections as if it's an afterthought. It's so embedded within white privilege, white supremacy, that many people some people wrote me, they're like, I didn't even know what intersectional feminism was. They knew what Black feminism was, but not intersectional feminism. And that's why I don't want any connection to it at all. But I want to be able to define myself as a Black womanist in my own way, in my own space, and not having people telling me I have to align with this to want equality for women.
Right. I will say that feminism is a really huge umbrella, and it does sometimes feel like, as a Black feminist, that we are constantly having to carve out our own little spaces and protect those spaces and reaffirm those spaces, and that work can distract us from the other really important work that we have to do for ourselves for survival, right? So in that way, I absolutely agree with you, and I do absolutely think it does get tiring. So at what point did you realize that you were a womanist? Like, this is it? Was it after reading Clenora Hudson Weems?
It was after reading Clenora Hudson Weems, but what really sparked this like feistiness and this, willingness to become a womanist was when all these things started happening to Black girls and Black women, Black transgendered women. And I just found that many of these so-called feminists, not all, were just really silent on these salient issues that were happening. For example, many of the people on my timeline who claim themselves to be feminists, and they were talking about that young girl that got flipped over in the chair by that police officer. And they didn't see that as racialized state violence and gender violence. They just saw an unruly Black girl. They didn't even think about, what about this girl's body? What about her rights? What about her mental state? It wasn't even about equality for her. It was like, she's an unruly, bad child, but they didn't even know the backstory. And seeing this chronically all the time, making excuses for white women and making and Black women and not having the same feedback, I just was like, this needs to stop. Because I feel like it's okay when we all come together kumbaya for women's rights, but when it comes to Black women, Black trans women, Black girls, it seems like our issues are pushed to the side. And I just became weary with that, and I'm really tired of that.
Right. So, of course, we all know that womanism originates from Alice Walker. She first outlined the definition in Search of Our Mother's Gardens. It's a book of essays. One of the reasons why I was originally put off from womanism, as she outlined it, was because of the way that it almost felt like centering men in like a movement to dismantle patriarchy, right? And I'm interested in your thoughts on if you feel like womanism in practice does that, or the role of men in womanism.
Yes. So, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because Clenora Hudson Weems mentions that the reason why there's such a need for Africana womanism in her definition is that white feminism not only doesn't recognize Black women, but it also doesn't recognize the plight of Black men as well. In my case, in terms of womanism, I'm not trying to center stage men at all, but I do want equality for everybody. And I realize that Black men too are a part of the systematic oppression. But then as a Black womanist, it's important that we put Black women's concerns, because sexism, lie, and violence and all those things Black men do perpetuate against Black women as well. And we need to talk about that and not just be like, oh, we want, Black women's lives matters too, and Black men's lives matter as well, but we need to be inclusive of Black women. It seems that Black women are always taking the center stage and caring for other people, being inclusive of other men and women's rights. But when it comes to us, no one is standing up for our needs. And that's why I believe that my womanism is for Black women to be on the center stage. Right. Not excluding Black men, but not putting them in the forefront of the agenda.
I think one of the most often leveled criticisms of feminism by, I guess, people that we would describe as like hotep or like, like detractors of Black detractors of feminism is that Black people live in community. So, Black men and Black women live in community together, and, Black gender nonconforming people, of course. And so we have to make sure to include them. I'm wondering if you think womanism does work to build community or mend community in any way?
I think womanism does work to build community, family, and things of that nature. And not saying that Black feminism does not, but what I'm getting with womanism, how I define it, is that we need to start working in our spaces together, coming together with Black men, Black women, Black people in the LGBTQ community, just coming together and working from the inside on our own things together, inside out. And I wrote another article about allyship, and yes, I believe in allyship, but more than ever, it's starting to come. We have to start doing things in our own spaces with each other first, and then maybe have others come in. But right now it's about rebuilding within ourselves. And I think that's what womanism, in a sense, does promote.
Absolutely. I think right now we're at a historical moment where we are seeing the limits of allyship. Right? Like, we're really seeing the limits of like the people who define themselves as good, like white people are good progressives.
Yes.
The way that those biases are creeping up in their conversations, the way that it's creeping up in who they are fighting for or who they're not fighting for.
Yes.
And so I do really appreciate your interventions here, like your theoretical interventions. So I am a proud Black feminist, as I've said before, and some of my Black feminist comrades were pretty upset at this article because of the way they felt like Black women are erased in your conception of what intersectional feminism is, or what it can do, or the limits of it. And so I'm wondering if you feel like by saying that we have no use for feminism, if we are erasing the work and the activism of the feminists who've come before.
And I was looking at those comments. People are like, you're excluding Patricia Hill Collins, Audre Lorde. And I'm like, no, I am really not trying, or Kimberly Crenshaw. I'm not trying to disregard. Their work is so needed. And I'm not disregarding that they identify as Black feminists or whatnot. But it's so important to why we put emphasis once again on language and words. And I don't identify with feminism for myself. I'm not saying I'm disregarding their work because of the historical contemporary implications. Their work is much needed. I actually went to an event about Florence Flo Kennedy, and she was one of the pioneering Black radical feminists. And I was sitting there as a womanist, admiring her work, because we need to learn from these women. And I'm not saying that they don't have a place, they need a place. But for myself and many other women, feminism has failed us. And Black women, feminism has failed women of color perpetually. And I'm just taking the time out right now as a Black woman to realign my stance, but also to learn from the greats like Florence Flo Kennedy, from Kimberly Crenshaw, who I really admire, and taking bits and pieces of their work and applying it to my life, but not identifying with feminism because, like I said, I feel like that's a word that wasn't created for Black women.
Absolutely. Language matters. I think we see it just in the way that intersectionality has influenced the way that we approach activism broadly. And I say we, the people who are working and fighting for liberation of all people, right? Like 25 years ago, intersectionality didn't exist, right?
No.
So naming is important, language is important. So I respect it. I completely understand it. My last question is going to be, you know, a lot of non-Black women read for Harriet.
Yes, they do.
A lot of, and women who are earnest in their desire to be of help, generally, right? So what do you feel is the role of a non-Black woman in womanism?
So I believe, once again, and we're, like you said, we're in a historic space. Now more than ever, it's time for non-Black women. And when I think of non-Black women, I think of white women, but also women of color who are not Black. In our space, you have to learn to listen and be enlightened, because I feel, I actually had this one comment from actually a white man saying, you know, I don't respect you because you are like leaving a movement that has so much to grow and learn from. And I said to him, this is how I self-define. I don't need you to tell me how I define myself as a Black woman. And I feel as if people get in their feelings and they don't want to listen to, once again, how the systematic implications of feminism and why Black women are now redefining ourselves on our own terms. And it's their job as non-Black women who read for Harriet to make sure they listen, they are educated, and they are enlightened about what is going on in the Black community, and not come in and tell people what they need to do and how they need to define themselves. And I feel like as a proper ally, I mean, that you should be following those steps, and also being willing to be critiqued as well as asking questions. I feel like everyone's opinion should be listened to, and we shouldn't always, you know, be on the defense about things, but don't come into a space that's for Black women, and having these negative comments as well.
So I said that was going to be the last question. I actually have one more.
No problem.
So you mentioned earlier that feminism has a long history, right? And I think it connects us to a global movement. It connects us to global history, a global struggle. Do you feel like employing the term womanism isolates you or limits the work that you're able to do in any way?
I don't feel like it isolates me myself, but I feel like in spaces where feminism is the norm, and when I come in and say, oh, I'm not a feminist, people isolate themselves from me. And I had that happen to me at an event. The event was great, and it was actually about Florence Flo Kennedy. And I said to one of the women that was there, I said, you know, I admire her work so much, and but I'm not a feminist, and that's why I don't align, because they try to write her out of the feminist movement. And she got so mad at me. And I was sitting here telling her about the history and also how I identify with women and girls empowerment and equality, and I still want all those things, but she didn't want to hear anything from me because I said I wasn't a feminist. And that, I feel like people don't want to accept that there are other ways of defining Black womanhood, and we don't have to rely on feminism to be the key to women and girls empowerment and equality.
Absolutely. Feminism does not have to be the ultimate signifier of whether or not you're down with the struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Jamie. This is so interesting.
Thank you.
I will absolutely say again, I am a proud Black feminist. I identify as one. That's not going to change, but I completely respect your right and other womanists' right to self-define and carve out this space and create this space. I respect it and I appreciate it. And so thank you so much for taking the time to engage. If people want to continue engaging with you, where can they find you? Like online, Twitter, whatever else you want to share?
They can find me. I have I don't have any nicknames. It's Jamie Swift at Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And I spell my name JAIMEESWIFT. So that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. I will put that in the description box below. Again, I'm Kimberly Foster, the founder and editor-in-chief of For Harriet. If you want to hit me up at Kimberly, N as in Nicole, Foster. Literally everywhere. Send me an email. I troll the For Harriet Facebook page. So you'll see me around. Thank you so much and have a great night.